Hello everybody, we're going to hit you up with another presidential election. This one, the election of 1792, George Washington, the incumbent president going for that second term. Can he get it done the second time around? Let's take a look at that election right now. Same idea as the last video. We're going to go over the candidates, we're going to go over the background, we're going to take a look at those election results. Now, the incumbent president is George Washington. He has a pretty easygoing first term. He is supported on all sides throughout his first term, given the fact that he is super popular with the American people. And that popularity goes up when the Bill of Rights was ratified. The Bill of Rights are the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. It was originally going to be 12 amendments, but only 10 got ratified. The 11th article of the Bill of Rights became the 27th Amendment, which was ratified, I believe, in 1992, and that concerned congressional pay raises. And another article is still pending before the states. But nevertheless, the Bill of Rights is passed. The anti-feds get what they want, and that is a Bill of Rights. So Washington is considering retirement. He's considering retiring from the presidency after one term, and he's wanting to hand over the reins to somebody else. But by the time 1792 rolls around, factional differences are beginning to rise between the Federalists and the now Democratic Republicans coming from the old Anti-Federalists. We'll talk about them in just a second. So both sides encouraged Washington to run for the second term to kind of bridge these differences, and Washington accepts, and as a result, once again, this becomes a contest for the vice presidency. But remember, we do not have the 12th Amendment, so Washington does have opponents that he has to face, but he is essentially running unopposed like he did in the first election. Now, for the vice presidency, for the Federalists, we have the incumbent vice president, John Adams of Massachusetts. He's wanting that second term. And for the Democratic Republicans, we have the governor of New York, George Clinton, and the Secretary of State, Thomas Jefferson from Virginia. Now, the Democratic Republicans had wanted Jefferson to be the vice president, but that would have cost them the state of Virginia, because electors were not allowed to cast their two ballots for two people that were from the same state. Washington was a Virginian, so this could not happen. But we'll get into all that in just a second as well. Now, as I said, by the time 1792 rolls around, factional tensions are beginning to rise in the United States and American politics, and this leads to the formation of the first two political parties. And a little side note here, Washington was never a Federalist. Washington was never a Democratic Republican. He was officially nonpartisan. But for the most part, he did side with the Federalists on some as far as policy making is concerned. Anyway, the first two political parties were formed, the Federalists and the Democratic Republicans. And the Federalists are being led by the Secretary of the Treasury, Alexander Hamilton. These guys believed in a stronger federal government. They believed the government should have a leading role in the economy, and they favored closer ties with Britain. Meanwhile, the Democratic Republicans, who were led by Secretary Jefferson and Congressman James Madison of Virginia, keep that name in the back of your mind because he's going to be a future president. And these guys favored states' rights. They believed in a smaller government. They opposed Hamilton's economic program. They wanted more cordial relations with France. They wanted the United States to be closer to France. Now, Hamilton's economic program called for governmental assumption of all state debts that had been accumulated before the Constitution came around, favored tariffs on imported goods, favored a whiskey tax, which would lead to the Whiskey Rebellion in 1794, and the establishment of the first Bank of the United States. Now, Jefferson and Madison were opposed to this, but to kind of give the Hamiltonians what they wanted, they compromised. This can be called the Compromise of 1790. Hamilton got what he wanted. He got his economic program passed, and the Democratic Republicans got the right to the national capital. And it would eventually be built on land owned by Virginia along the Potomac River. It would be called the city of Washington, but the government would not relocate there until 1800. Therefore, throughout the 1790s, the capital would be in Philadelphia. Now, the 1792 elections as a whole, this is really the first elections contested on any partisan base. Remember, the first elections, we didn't really have any issues to talk about. We were just electing the first Congress. We were just electing the first president. Now we have something to campaign on. And in most states, as far as the congressional elections are concerned, it's really, as put by Jefferson strategist John Beckley, a struggle between the Treasury Department and the Republican interest. New York was more notable in this sense. John Jay, who was a Hamiltonian, he was the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. He was going up against the incumbent Governor George Clinton, who was actually running for the vice presidency, technically the presidency, because we don't have the 12th Amendment, but still running for the vice presidency nevertheless. Now, with all of those things in mind, let's get to the results. Washington is going to do it again. He is the only president to ever be unanimously elected, and he does this twice. He gains all 132 votes in the Electoral College, and he easily wins his second term. Adams is going to be re-elected vice president with 77 electoral votes. Clinton's going to finish with 50. Jefferson's going to get the 4 vice presidential electoral votes of Kentucky. Remember, since Jefferson and Washington were Virginians, the electors in Virginia could not vote for those two on the same ballot. And Burr only receiving 1. Aaron Burr of New York receiving only 1 electoral vote. Only Pennsylvania and Maryland counted the popular vote. So 28,579 votes were cast. And this is the lowest turnout for a presidential election, 0.88%. But also do remember that really up until the mid-1820s, these voter turnouts in these presidential elections are going to be a little bit on the low side because of the fact that only land-owning white men could vote. This was the first election in which all 13 of the original states would be able to participate in a presidential election, and also the first time Kentucky and Vermont were able to participate in a presidential election. So, Washington is elected to a second term as president. He is going to step down in 1796, setting the stage for finally a contested election. That election is 1796, and we will talk about that next time. With that, I hope you get a lot out of this video. If you haven't seen any of my previous videos, go on ahead and watch those if you want. And with that, we will see you next time.